Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 91st episode of the Spiritual Brainstorm. In this video, I'd like to talk about vibrations in reality and the difference between something that is fundamental in the universe, which is harmony, and making sure that different vibrations interact in a non dissonant manner, and then the form that we give the vibrations and that we call our reality. So, quick recap here. So this is the model as I've identified, uh, the farthest that I've gone so far. I've actually now split this into conscious and unconscious, two different parts here. So conscious and unconscious. The reason being is that I believe that life, which is really at the center, the living cell, is really at the center of everything and is the tipping point between one type of universe, one type of experience, and another. Um, and those, I think, represent best the titles conscious and unconscious. But of course, the consciousness that is developed on this side then permeates into the unconscious. So let's just back up a little bit. So again, zero or nothingness and infinity. And in the unconscious state, they tend to try to structure themselves infinity going towards nothingness and nothingness going towards infinity, trying to be that which they aren't, going towards each other. And nothingness, the first thing that it becomes is vibrations, energy, or sound. And that refers, of course, to the Om sound that you hear in the Hindu religions. And of course, in my mind, the way that you go from infinity to something lower than infinity is multiverses. That is the step down from infinity. And of course, these two are aligned, which means that multiverses are at the level of vibration, energy, and sound, which is why it's very hard to get information about multiverses because they communicate between each other at the most raw and fundamental level, which is the one of vibrations, in a space that is really beyond our comprehension. Now, at the level of our universe, that is a step down again from infinity. That is where you get light, photons, and the torus idea, which is basically a form of black hole, wrapping information around itself. And so that is a step further from vibrations. There's now a shape to the vibrations, that of the photon. Then another step towards infinity from the point, or a step down from infinity, is galaxies and elementary particles. Then you go to atoms and solar systems. And then you go to molecules and planets. And that is where you step down and you can see that where you merge the idea of the planet and the molecule, they sort of meet in the middle and create life. So life can be deemed as, well, a living planet, I guess, a mini living planet. You could put it that way. And from then on, it then becomes more and more complex in terms of levels of consciousness. Of course, now the next level is conscious planet, where you actually find the same level as you were stepping down. Now you're going back up, but here from molecule towards life, and towards here, that becomes now a conscious planet. And here, from the planet stepping down from infinity, you go towards the humanoid, which is still going down, stepping down from infinity, but becoming more and more conscious. And you're actually, it's smaller than the planet, in terms of well, the space that we occupy as human beings. Of course, we're smaller than a planet. That's no brainer. But the level of consciousness that we can be reached from us is still quite incredible. So then we go to multiple ET civilizations, spiritual masters, Buddha, and God, ultimately. God as in source, oneness, between all multiverses. Buddha is the conscious universe. So here, conscious universe, conscious galaxy, conscious solar system, conscious multiverse. And at this stage, you could say that we're just a step away from nothingness because everything is one. Everything is one, and what I've written here is new cycle of self-awareness of its own infinite nature merges with self-awareness of its own emptiness. And so you begin a new cycle where this is the end and it starts over right here. Oops. Down there. And starts again. In the same kind of cycle of going towards self-awareness and then back towards forgetting and so on and so forth. But what's interesting is I was reflecting whether these different parts that I've identified here, atoms, molecules, elementary particles, whether those are real or fixed in our reality, or whether they're just a form that can actually, and for other civilizations, other humanoid-like ET civilizations, whether they structure this differently. And what I got as an insight is that indeed, if you have listened to Bashar's channeling or Pleiadians explaining their view and model of the universe, or the Umo or plenty of other races, they don't necessarily have the same terminology and they don't have the same exact kind of way of structuring these. But the commonality, what I find, is harmony. That is the precondition. Harmony between all of the parts going upwards towards the humanoid. And I'll illustrate this on the keyboard, which will be much more practical, and also give a few other examples of where we are at, what we're being asked, and how we can sort of bend the rules of physics, chemistry, and biology. So here I'm giving the example of how it works with music and sound, which I find is the best way to illustrate this. And you could imagine that basically each octave in the piano represents one layer or one level in this hold-on structure that I usually describe. That is systems nested within systems. So you would say photons in elementary particles in atoms, atoms in molecules, molecules in living cells in humans. Those are all sort of systems and structures embedded one in the other. And ultimately, you still have some kind of variety and leeway or different possibilities in the form that you give those structures. And the reason our structures, I believe, are so stable in a way, that is, we don't see the laws of physics changing every day, is simply because since our way of interacting with reality is not very harmonious, imagine if the rules of physics would shift and change on top of our reality. How would we even learn how to interact in a harmonious way between humans if certain of the fundamental laws were changing all the time? And so I like to compare our evolution of experience and reality the way that music evolved. So you think of, for instance, chant in at least European cultures, because here I'm mostly talking about the European way of, and Western way of kind of evolving and experiencing this ascension process, because this is really tied to our culture. Obviously, other cultures experience reality in a totally different way. Some of them are almost have a completely different interaction with nature, and they could care less about the laws of physics because that is not the world they're living in, the reality they're experiencing. They're talking to spirits, they're interacting with energies. So I mean, to them, whether a rock falls consistently on the ground may not be the most fundamental thing for them. For us, it's really important because our entire society and civilization and the way we view the world is built on these premises, the materialism, the materialist foundation. So in Western music, basically we went from very basic music where you just had a pedal tone, what's called a pedal tone. It's just a few elementary notes, no chords, like an open chord. And then on top of that, you had very simple melodies. And you consistently keep this pedal tone going. And that pedal tone, to me, is a very good metaphor, for instance, to compare to, the laws of physics, chemistry, biology, things that are very, very stable and strict and don't just change out of a whim. But ultimately, in each octave, you have a lot of possibilities. Different possibilities for chords, for notes. And so, let's just imagine that the atom in the rules of physics is just one note in the octave, and we've only discovered that one way that you can interact with the system that we give a form to and we call an atom, for instance. But it's not really an atom, that's the form we give it. It's actually just like a sort of an octave or a frequency band or vibration or energy that represents that system embedded within a larger system. So it's just like basically animals in an ecosystem. On other planets, you probably have a different mix between different animals and different plants, and it's still harmonious, even though the actual animals and plants are completely different. And you have even completely different ecosystems in various parts of the world. So that just goes to show that with the same kind of ingredients, you can still have completely different structures. And the stability is more a function of us and our level of consciousness. So imagine if that basically we're in this reality where we experience a very stable, continuous reality like linear time, space, gravity, all of these laws that are very strict and stable. And what we're doing basically, because humanity is not very evolved in terms of its consciousness, its level of consciousness, because we cannot find the way of interacting in a harmonious way between each other, it means we're still exploring our own octave as humanity, as a humanoid kind of conscious species that has this kind of awareness. So something that is the bridge between biology and something else, which I call the world of thought or ideas. So imagine like we try. Ouch. And so we're trying things, and imagine if we were trying things and at the same time things here on our reality would change chaotically. I mean, it would be even much more chaotic, impossible to reach a harmony or to discover sort of how we should interact with each other if the different subsystems were not really stable. And then we could, that sounds good. I think I found something. And if you don't have that stability, you have no point of reference. Everything shifts all the time. It's very difficult to find a way to really get a grip on the rules or the fundamentals of how humans should interact in harmony. Now, what I think that other civilizations, for instance, have a completely different way of explaining how they interact with the universe, how they call their own kind of elementary particles and stuff. And it may just be that they're either on a different pedal tone as a basis, they may be on a different kind of scale, like for instance, an E scale instead of a C scale. And these are, of course, just metaphors, but it's really, I think it's really relevant in terms of how to think about it, because sound is the substrate, a very good way to illustrate vibrations and the concept of vibrations, frequencies. And so imagine if basically intergalactic travel is you have your pedal tone, or main chord, which is your physical reality. And then imagine you just move from that chord to a different vibratory kind of frequency band. And then you go back, once you're arrived in another planet, you just resume, you go back to your original vibration or frequency. And so, for instance, it would be like, I am material, then I become immaterial, just pure light, for instance, and travel at the speed of light. And then once I arrive at my point of destination, I return to my previous vibration. And that is basically how music works. I mean, you just start with a vibration, a certain chord, then you move away from that chord, and then you come back to that chord. And these playing around with these vibrations, to me, is changing your state. Changing, for instance, the composition of your body, the state of your atoms, the state of the photons or the elementary particles within your atoms. All of that, you can deconstruct that, change the vibration or the information in it, and then resume your initial frequency or vibration when you get to a planet and you want to experience that planet in a physical way, with your five senses, with touch, smell, all these different things. And eventually that's how I think things will work, is that we'll have, the rules of physics will still be there, of course, if we need them, but we'll be able to really play around with them, just like you can move around with the chords. And once we as we advance and we sort of learn and develop our consciousness, then there's just the evolution of the experience we're going to have in reality is going to mirror the evolution of music, basically. So you could think of different alien civilizations as one civilization being the masters of blues, like they would... And so their way of sort of interacting with reality, they've perfected a way of sort of interacting with reality that is based on that kind of structure, blues. Some other civilizations, they've developed a jazzy approach, to reality. And that's totally fine. Then others, it may be just pure classical music, when they're explaining their model of reality, they're talking about their own, what they call their elementary particles, how they behave, or their rules for the speed of light and all of that. It's not to be taken as a truth or the right way to see a reality. It's just like somebody that knows only Gregorian chant being presented, contemporary classical music. It's a big shock to them because the possibilities are endless. It's like going from Gregorian chant to free jazz. You'd be completely lost, and of course also very impressed. But that doesn't mean that we should just emulate their model. It's more like taking it as a source of inspiration for us. But what's interesting in music is developing your own unique kind of style and approach to music. And this is what is interesting for the universe as well, is not for us to become Pleiadians number 2 or something. And I have this anecdote, for instance, that's really interesting. It's like George Gershwin, a very famous American jazz composer, wanted to take classes with Maurice Ravel, which is a French composer. And Ravel told him, look, you're already such a good Gershwin. Don't make me transform you into a bad Ravel, And that's the whole point. Like the composers, the reason why we like certain composers is because they really owned their identity and their personality. And so for us, the priority, of course, is to sort of master the frequency band that humanity is allotted as a sort of a structure, as a building block in the universe. Just like a living cell has to master its sort of frequency band and structure that goes from tiny multicellular organisms all the way up to plants and human beings. All that is the frequency band, you could say, or the vibration that a living cell can occupy. And humanoids also have a sort of a dedicated vibration and frequency band. And we should explore that. And then we should, once we're harmonious, once we know how to use it, once we know how to harmoniously use it, once we sort of become accustomed to the rules of harmony, which is, to me, what's most universal about the reality, is the rules of harmony, then with those rules of harmony, within those rules, you can have tremendous diversity and a lot of different experiences, but at least you don't do just random stuff that sounds absolutely chaotic and terrible, which is what would happen if we would gain access to these advanced technologies. Like if you, for instance, develop very complex sort of harmonies in the left hand as a harmonious basis, for instance, and you don't know how to resolve it, you're not really a master of your own kind of frequency band, then you have no idea what to do. I mean, it's really difficult to sort of navigate these complex harmonies, which is why it's really important to not try to escape materialism as fast as possible. It's really a very good guardrail for a sort of a stable development of exploring our own sort of frequency band and vibrational sort of band that we're in as humanity. So I hope that was interesting, and if you have any comments, feel free to ask, and talk to you in the next video.